welcome to the final installment of this How I Did It mini-series. I've been using this series as an opportunity to A, celebrate the launch of On It 2026, B, help us all to connect the dots between the action that we take today and the growth and results that we're going to see in the future. I really believe, and actually I don't just believe it, I know it to be true, which is why I'm doing these episodes, to show you the evidence that the action that you take on your business can and will have a direct link to the business that you're running, the results that you have, the reality that you're in 3 to 6 months' time. And in today's installment, I'm going to be breaking down one of what I'd say is probably my most asked questions, which was how I got a feature in Forbes, a full page feature all about me and about my business. Now, I have to quickly say, if you are tuning into this episode the day that it comes out, then friend, this is your last chance to join On It at the early bird price. You can join now, save your space for 2026, make a decision that your future self is going to be very grateful for at the lowest price possible. If you know that you want to work on your business next year with more intention, with more ease, On It is the space to do that. The sales page is full of case studies and stories from people that can tell you how brilliant it is far better than I can. So head to the link in show notes if you're interested in joining us. Without further ado, here is how I got a feature in Forbes. Speaking of Forbes, I have just realized that the piece that I'm talking about is actually on my office gallery wall to my left as I'm speaking now. That was not intentional, that was not planned, but hey, when I was building out a gallery wall, I wanted it to tell the story of my business and have some cool wins on it, and that Forbes feature is definitely one of those wins. So if you want to see that, feel free to come over to watch this on YouTube and you can see the feature I'm speaking about next to me as I'm talking to you about the feature itself. But I was featured in Forbes all about how I built my second business. I have a second business that's a stationery shop called On Paper, and I got a full page feature in Forbes. I'm not talking like a little mention in an article. I'm talking like an article about me in Forbes, which I'll say up front was such a pinch me moment. Like, I remember the day that it came out, just in disbelief that I was seeing my face and my name next to the Forbes logo. I remember sending it to my family and my brothers being like, this is so cool. And I was like, oh my gosh, they finally understand that I'm actually doing something somewhat impressive, like, because it's in Forbes, that means so much to them. And it was such a cool moment. It was something that just meant so much to me. And I remember being such a proud moment in my business journey. And it's something that's really helped my business ever since, you know, in terms of visibility, legitimacy. It's a cool story to tell. And getting featured in Forbes was not something that I pitched for. I didn't approach a journalist and say, hey, I've got an idea. Do you want to write about this? It is something that came to me more organically, but as I'm explaining with every episode of this series, was not accidental. Nothing in business is an accident. You can track back something that happened to the action that you took and the mindset that you had in the past. So what did it take for me to get this Forbes feature? Well, there's kind of two pieces to the puzzle here, which I want to unpack. The first piece of the puzzle is that what primarily got me the Forbes feature was the fact that I started my second business. And actually not just the fact that I started it, but the speed at which I begun it. I documented my journey of building On Paper, which is my stationery company, and I shared that really openly, more specifically through the lens of how I was building this business in a short period of time. I think at the time it was about 6 weeks from having the idea to the launch day of the first batch of products, which for any business, let alone a product-based one, is a very short timeline. I documented that journey online, and it was that story, that angle, that kind of experience that was so interesting to the journalist. I should say, by the way, the journalist has now become one of my close friends, so I don't know why I'm making them anonymous. It's the amazing Bianca Barrett. She runs a brilliant company called The Scoop. If you want to learn how to get yourself in press, then that is the place to be. And she's amazing. But at the time, we didn't really know each other that well, but I'll get onto that in a second. And it was the story of building On Paper and the kind of way that I'd shared that was really of interest to her. And so I want to start by saying that it's that ultimately got me the Forbes feature. And what allowed me, let's get really kind of in the weeds here, to build a business, to build a second business and do it in a short space of time, which is what I got the feature about. What was needed was a real dedication to breaking down a big idea into small, manageable chunks. There is no way I could have built on paper in 6 weeks if I hadn't have had a really solid habit of knowing what the goal was and then breaking it down into tiny, tiny steps. If you are familiar with the kind of routine of setting a goal or saying you want to do something, maybe having a bit of initial momentum and excitement, but then not really carrying through with it, or feeling overwhelmed suddenly, or feeling like you don't know how to move towards it, what I'm going to bet is that you have not broken that bigger goal or idea down into tiny, tiny steps. The biggest and best productivity hack I could ever give you is to break things down into tiny steps. Tinier than you think they need to be. Individual steps which take 10, 20 minutes at a time. Building a new business in 6 weeks was not easy, but it was made so much easier by that structure that I had. Because I work on my business and I have that skill set of turning bigger goals into smaller chunks, I could apply that to this new project. And because of that, I could then move at a really quick pace, even when I felt very time poor, I had tiny chunks of time, even when it felt like I wasn't making much progress at one, moment. I was doing all of these small things that then added up. So that's the first thing that we can learn from my Forbes feature, is that I had to do something pretty impressive to get into Forbes. And the impressive thing that I did was made possible because I broke my bigger goal down into these small, tiny, manageable chunks. Honestly, the work that I do with people in On It is not rocket science. It's not difficult stuff. It's just difficult to do it for and by yourself. So much of On It is me just holding space for people to go, right, what's my goal and how do I chip away? What's the thing that's important to me? And how do I move towards that this month, this week, this day? It's understanding how the big vision, the big goal translates into the tiny action steps and building that muscle of regularly breaking it down and putting things in front of yourself. So that's the first thing that led me to get my Forbes feature, was that ability to break something down into smaller steps and therefore achieve something quite cool in a short period of time. And then the second thing I want to break down that I think really helped me get the Forbes feature was my community and my network. As I mentioned, the brilliant journalist who wrote the piece is now a business friend and someone that I am really connected with and admire, but at the time, they weren't super familiar to me. And it was actually at one of my own events where we first met, we got talking, and I was able to harness the power of that community around me, the network that I was in order for that opportunity to happen. I did an episode recently, which I'll link in the show notes, all about how the most valuable part of community is not what you learn, but is the vision that then gets expanded by being around people that think differently and being around people that are doers. And I remember I never really thought that being in Forbes is something that would be possible to me. But a few months before my feature, I remember meeting a few business friends and being in a few communities where people had been featured in Forbes, or where people had done these quite cool, interesting things, or people had put themselves forward for something or believed that they could do it. And actually from that, I then started to think, maybe I could be in Forbes. Maybe I've got a story to tell. Maybe I do have something that people might want to read about or a journalist might want to write about. I see, looking back, that the community that I was in helped me to believe that something like that could be possible, so that when I then, again in community, met the journalist, it wasn't too scary to me to be like, hey, what if we did a feature about this? Or, I'd love to be in Forbes one day. When I say that being in the right community expands your vision, that is what I mean. When you believe that bigger things are possible for you, it's easier to then go after those things. It's easier to then be in a position where those things are offered to you or available. Also, just naturally, it was by being in community and connected that I met the journalist. If I didn't proactively put myself in places of community and seek to build relationship with people, not just people that could be clients, but people in my world, people that were, of interesting other businesses, I wouldn't have met the journalist. I wouldn't have then got featured in Forbes. Yes, there are other ways that you can get press features, but for me, it actually came from a lot of all of these smaller, more indirect actions that I took. It's been really interesting this year and On It to get people's feedback and to realize that actually one of the biggest things they feedback on is something I'd never expected, which is the community. I didn't think that that would be, a massive part of the value to people, because you can just come, be quiet, do this work, never look at the chat box. But so much of what people said was it's so energizing. It expands my vision. It makes me a lot more ambitious to be doing this work alongside other people. And I see that for myself. I don't think that I would have been as open to putting myself forwards for that piece, saying yes to it, being excited, bringing my best if I didn't believe that something like a Forbes feature was possible for me. And that was because I'd been around people that had achieved something similar. That's what I mean when I say that kind of your community and your connection matters. And so in summary, I think really what allowed me to be featured in Forbes was, number one, my ability to turn a big goal into manageable chunks and therefore launch a business in 6 weeks, do something that Forbes wanted to write about. And number two, my proactiveness to get myself into communities where people were ambitious, where there were doers, so that not only my vision could be expanded and I could be excited about something like this, but also so that I could meet the people that would help make it happen. That is how I got into Forbes, alongside the incredible journalist believing in me and wanting to write my story. And that brings a close to this mini series of how I did it. I've actually really enjoyed recording these episodes and kind of sitting and thinking back and like, okay, that shiny thing that happened, like what led to it and how can I connect the dots? And I'm really hoping that you've found that valuable and interesting as well. My goal with this series is to remind us all, myself included, that the action we take is powerful, that we don't always see the results right away, but they do create change. When we work intentionally, when we step back and work on our businesses, things happen. And that is why I'm so passionate about On It. If you haven't joined already, let this be one of your final reminders, especially before this early bird price ends, to save your space for 2026. The beauty of On It is that it can work for so many different types of business owners at different stages of growth. If you have any questions about it, feel free to put me a message or an email, but I'll leave the link to it in the show notes. I can't wait to see lots of you in there for 2026, and I'll be back in your ears very soon.